Hey, it's Chuck Armstrong with Loudwire Nights, and this is Loudwire Nights On Demand. I love talking to rock stars and musicians, man, but I also love chatting with stand-up comics. Fortunately, this guy is a rock and roll fanatic, and he's pretty funny too. Mr. Don Jamieson hung out with us on Wednesday, May 29th. Enjoy this one. I am so happy to be hanging with tonight's special guest, a completely worthless piece of trivia here that will serve you in no way at all. But one of the first interviews I ever did for Loudwire was with tonight's guest at Metallica's Orion Music and More Festival in Atlantic City, way back in the before time in 2012. Now, over the last, decade plus, he's covered a lot of ground leading up to his most recent accolade, the release of his brand new album, No Sleep Till McSorley's. The one and only Don Jamieson. Thank you so much for hanging tonight, man.
Oh, dude, that's amazing that you remember that. And yes, that was one of the great honors of my life. And I got to perform in front of Metallica, so that was good too.
That's right. I think Lars introduced you too, right, on stage?
Yeah, as if I wasn't nervous enough to go up in front of thousands of sweaty, drunk metalheads. Standing there, probably thinking another band was going to take the stage, and
that's right. Yeah,
here comes a comedian. But they were, that's the thing about Metallica, and maybe my next record will be a tribute to those guys, because they always have been and still are so fan friendly, and they're always so hands on and involved in all the projects that they do. So, to be handpicked by them to play at their festival, meant the world to me, obviously. And they still are to this day. They always, they're just class. They do everything the right way.
That's right, man. And, that Orion Festival is a great example of this. But, we talk to a lot of musicians on the show, but I love talking to comedians too, because I think there's such a similarity between how rock fans connect with music and how we also connect with comedy. And, sometimes we get to hang with a guy like you who lives in both worlds, really, and brings them together without any sort of boundaries or anything like that. And so, I got to ask, man, before we get into this new album, No Sleep Till McSorley's, before we get to any of that, I got to ask, can you take me back to the early days of Don Jamieson? Fans know you from your albums, no doubt from the amazing VH1 show, That Metal Show, and many other things. But one thing I haven't heard a whole lot about is just how this all started, and how you got into bridging that gap between comedy and rock.
Yeah, well, rampant truancy helps. So
as simple as that, yeah.
Those are, Chuck, those are always my worlds from the time I was probably 10 years old until the current day, which is, heavy music and comedy. And my first two albums were Kiss Destroyer and George Carlin, Occupation Fool. And I loved both of them because, number one, my parents hated both of them, or at least they didn't want me listening to it. And even though maybe sometimes I didn't necessarily get all the humor, I knew it was subversive, and I knew I was on the right track. And of course, every parent hated Kiss, but when you're 10 years old, they're rock stars, they're comic book characters, they're superheroes, and there's nothing better than that when you're 11, right? So, but here I am, in my 50s, and I still love Kiss.
I love that, man. Yeah, and here we are, man, celebrating your latest record, No Sleep Till McSorley's, which, if I heard right, man, debuted at #1 on the charts, right?
Yeah. So thank you everybody who's been supporting it. Obviously, it is my tribute to the mighty Motorhead, who were cool enough to let me use the actual artwork from No Sleep Till Hammersmith and the Motorhead font. And, Phil Campbell played the opening guitar riff on the album. So this is what I always say, we're talking to fans who love this kind of music like we do. But I always say, listen, if you get the packaging, it's a bonus. If you don't, what's on the inside is for everybody. Do I talk about music? Of course I do. How could I not? It's such a big part of my life. But, there's a lot of stuff on here also that just appeals to a regular crowd. So obviously, I always love paying tribute to my favorite bands. And I'm ashamed it took me 5 albums to do Motorhead, but we got there, and I'm so thrilled with the way it came out.
And how's it feel to have it out now, man? You've got some space in between recording it, getting it ready for release, now officially released. How's it feel?
Well, you get worried, Chuck, like that because I recorded this September 2023, and it doesn't come out until April 2024. So you start to worry, like, oh, is the material going to be old by then? But the great thing is, a lot of stuff I talk about is all the crazy stuff that is going on in the world.
Yeah.
And doesn't seem like there's going to be an end to any of that. So it's still a good therapy session for myself and anybody else listening. And I think the stuff is maybe even more powerful, 6 months later.
Yeah, listen, crazy stuff in the world. I mean, that's timeless. That's evergreen, man. So you definitely nailed that. Yeah, and I love the nod to Motorhead. I mean, just that classic "No Sleep Till Hammersmith," which in and of itself, you talked about the next album maybe being a tribute to Metallica. Of course, Metallica paid tribute to Motorhead with their demo tape "No Life Till Leather." And I got to say though, most importantly, for any listeners who've been to New York City, there's a great nod here to one of the oldest bars in the city, the legendary McSorley's. And I love that's part of this forever too, man.
Yeah, well, that's most of my interviews are about McSorley's and Motorhead, which are two of my favorite things in the world anyway. And they've never done a show in McSorley's, because obviously I could have done it in any of the comedy clubs. They would have, been happy to have me in there. But I like, again, I like the setting to be a part of the experience. And I just knew this material had to be done in front of beer drinkers and hellraisers. And I've been going to McSorley's for a long time. So when I came up with the idea, I asked the owner, I said, how much to rent the place out for the night? We'll build the stage. We'll bring in the PA system. And she said, how long have you been coming here? I said, 30 years. She said, you paid enough.
That's amazing, man. I love hearing that. Yeah. And listen, this is a legendary bar, sawdust on the floor and 2 types of beer. That's it. Light and dark ale. And, the snacks or the food, whatever, you get a sleeve of saltine crackers and a chopped up white onion and then some cheddar cheese. And that's all you need, man. And there's nothing like it.
Mustard. And the hot mustard.
Right, the hot mustard. Yeah.
You got to complete the bad breath trilogy with that. But
That's right.
That's it. No holes barred, or just a real old school vibe in there. People hang out together. If you're sitting at a table and there's empty chairs, they put people from anywhere in the world next to you. And next thing you know, you're drinking McSorley's ale and solving the world's problems.
And, the tributes extend too, because if I saw this right, you are releasing a vinyl edition of this, which I think is really cool, man, to have a comedy album on vinyl. And and there's going to be 2 variants, a light ale color and a dark ale cover, which, is just the coolest tribute, I think, to McSorley's, man.
Yeah, well, thank you. The physical product to me is still the best. I use all the services. I stream music. I download music. I listen to my CDs still, but I probably haven't bought one in at least 15 years. I don't have kids and I don't do drugs, so I spend a lot of money on vinyl. I would be remiss if I did not put this one out on vinyl. And the light and dark colored variants for the psycho vinyl collectors like me, they're going to have to get both of them. So that's a fun selling point. But I still have my old George Carlin LPs from back in the day, from the time I was talking about. So I did it with my last album, Denim and Laughter, on vinyl, and people really loved it. So we did it again this time.
That's great, man. And listen, you get into this, right? We've been talking a lot about kind of around it, but you get into this and you cover a lot of ground on this album, man. And I got to say, a moment that stood out to me, and I know it stands out to everybody when they get to it, is you talking about leprechauns and how you were kind of reflecting on a previous set, and you told a joke about leprechauns, and someone came up to you and said that was offensive to Irish people, and so you get into all of that, man, and into pronouns and wokeness, and I know this is just a small portion on the album, but it actually seems to be a pretty regular topic of conversation in the world of comedy. Is wokeness hurting comedy? I mean, Jerry Seinfeld went on this big, press tour for his latest movie and talked about how, you can't do edgy comedy these days, at least not on television. Do you think like as you, obviously you perform this in your set, but as you kind of take a step back and as you really look at the landscape of comedy, you think about your own career, do you think wokeness or whatever that is changes how you do comedy?
No, not really, because luckily, Chuck, I'm not big enough for anybody to want to cancel me. So,
please cancel me, please.
Yes, I've been trying for the last couple albums to get canceled, and no one's really paying attention. But no, I'll tell you, man, it's interesting. It's funny that I'm glad that someone like Seinfeld will speak out about it, because obviously he's, one of the greatest of all time. I mean, he made a movie about Pop-Tarts, so I doubt he's going to have any trouble, with the woke crowd with that one. But
not the edgiest.
yeah, but Seinfeld is a legend, and I'm glad he came out and said something.
And he's got that platform. Yeah.
Yeah. But in terms of the audience, I got to tell you, man, the audiences are maybe better, because the people who are triggered or think they're offended or pretend they're offended, they stay home now and, argue with people on social media. They don't really come to the comedy clubs. So the people that come to have a good time. And in terms of the material, I want the jokes to be funny to anybody that I'm talking about, and no one takes a worse beating than me, of course, but anybody I'm talking about, I want them to be able to laugh, because it's so important for us to laugh at ourselves. And this is the same, a lot of my favorite bands, there's always an element of tongue in cheek with those bands where they really don't take themselves that seriously, but they're great, and they can make a point through their art.
Yeah, for sure, man. And listen, I mean, anybody who has heard you over time and even just spends time with this album, it's not like you take sides. Everybody's a target. Everybody's on there, politically, left, right, whatever. Like you just you take on everything, and I love that, man.
Yeah, you have to. That's the other thing. I see a lot of comics, and there's many who are much better than me. And I see them up on stage, like preaching to their audience and scolding them. And I'm like, nah, that's not, call me old fashioned, but I thought we got paid to make people laugh. So yeah, I always try to make sure I'm not dividing the audience. And then the great thing for me on this album is the happy ending to the album is the music stuff, where I say, forget, the phonies in Hollywood, forget politics. What really unites us, what really bonds us is music, and that's the whole end of the album is put your faith in rock and roll.
Yeah. And I'll take that preaching any day, man. But
exactly.
Like you said, like a 10-year-old Don Jamieson getting that George Carlin album, maybe not even understanding it, but knowing some of it's subversive, like even as you take cracks at everybody, like there is something powerful about that might, even if I do get triggered about something or offended about something, like maybe it kind of opens me up to being like, all right, we're all part of this, whatever you call this thing called life. And, we all have our different things that might separate us, might make us unique, but also we're all here together, all getting cracked at by Don. And it's not the worst thing in the world,
Yeah. Again, you can't let, the minute we lose the comedy, it's over, because that's such a universal thing. And like I said, I really worked on this material hard for 2 years to really make sure it was spot on, and so that I could talk about the trans movement. I could talk about racism and leprechauns, for God's sake.
Yeah, man.
Leprechaun material is not easy, Chuck.
No, you're a brave man. And keeping faith in music. I mean, I love the fact that Metal Blade put this out too. I mean, what's that mean for you? I mean, this is what, album number 5 on Metal Blade? Is that right?
Yeah.
What's that mean for you, man, as a fan of rock and roll and as a comedian, like to be on such a legendary label like Metal Blade?
Yeah, I just, of course, outside of my friendship with Brian Slagle, their CEO, and of course the people that have worked there since I've been with them, who have become friends. They're a great record label that has put out so much music that's a part of the fabric of who I am, over the years since I'm a teenager, picking up the Brian's Metal Massacre LPs from back in the day. So yeah, when, I remember, my buddy Jim Florentine had met Brian, and he goes, oh, he's so cool. And he's sending me a bunch of Iron Maiden bootlegs and all this. And I was upset, like as if Jim had like asked a girl out that I've been in love with like for my whole life. that's how much Brian and Metal Blade meant to me. And I'm like, I want Brian Slagle to send me Iron Maiden bootlegs. So, and eventually he did, and he offered me a record contract, and I'm forever grateful.
That's great, man. So what's on the horizon for you, man? Like, listen, I actually want to know what's on the horizon for you professionally, but also, as such a fan of music and rock and roll, like, are there concerts coming up, or have you seen anything this year that's just kind of blown you away?
Ooh, almost everything I've seen this year has really blown me away. I went to see KK's Priest here in New Jersey, where I live, and that really knocked my socks off. Queensryche and Armored Saint on the road together. That show was tremendous. And then I just had a weekend of Saxons and Vikings back to back on Friday and Saturday night. Amon Amarth on the Metal Crushes All tour, and of course the mighty Saxon, who I've done a tribute to on one of my albums. Was Saturday night. I drove up to upstate New York to see him, and that I just love that, man. This music is still alive, and there's a lot more to go this summer. So. Yeah, the concert calendar is full, and of course, I'll be out on the road. So if you see my name anywhere in your city, please come out and enjoy a show and pick up a copy of No Sleep Till McSorley's. I'll have the CDs and vinyl, and of course, still available for download.
I love that, man. Yeah, and listen, you're joining all those guys in the archive of Loudwire Nights guests, because we've had KK on and John Bush and Biff Byford, and so it's so good to have you celebrate them too, man.
Great. Oh, you guys have been beyond amazing to me and to the scene. It's just incredible what you guys do, and the platform you give all these bands. And I wrote a weekly column for you guys for years, so it's so cool to always reconnect with you guys again, and always appreciate the support.
Don Jamieson, thank you so much for hanging, man. Lots of ways to stay in touch with you. You're on Twitter at Real Don Jamieson, Instagram and Facebook at Don Jamieson Official, and then the Don Jamieson YouTube channel is a must to subscribe to. Get details on No Sleep Till McSorley's. Pre-order those light and dark ale variants of the vinyl, because if you're a completist, you got to get both. And hopefully can catch you on the road soon, man. But seriously, congrats on the release of this new album, No Sleep Till McSorley's, and we'll have to have you back on and hang again soon, man.
Great. Thank you, Loudwire Nights. Thank you guys, everybody listening, and Chuck, means the world. Thank you, brother.
That wraps up this episode of Loudwire Nights on Demand. Stay caught up with everything happening in the world of rock and metal on the Loudwire app and at loudwire.com.